The Wonderful World of Darklords. Report 37. The Boiling Isles. When I had arrived at Gravity Falls, I had been struck by how homelike and comforting it was. What a contrast to step from the mists into a land that was made from a decaying corpse. The trees were a bloody red, and the vapors of the boiling sea made the air so hot and humid that it felt like breathing through a warm, wet towel. Between that and the constant stink of putrefaction, it was the first time I felt grateful that my patron's necrotic energy has made breathing unnecessary for me. Drawing breath to speak was unpleasant enough. As hostile as the environment was, it was not my only reason for finding the Boiling Isles inhospitable. Years ago, I would have suspected my patron of sending me there as a perverse joke, for the majority of its tiefling and hexblood residents referred to themselves either as demons, or, more commonly, as witches. A domain wherein I was surrounded at all times by witches. Charming. By now, however, I knew that my patron had a legitimate reason for sending me to the Isles, likely involving their inherent magic. The corpse belonged to a creature that the witches refer to as a Titan, not to be confused with a certain self-aggrandizing megalomaniac or his domain, but a creature more akin to a god, and his power still suffuses the landscape, spreading as it decomposes. The Titan's carcass, however, is not the only source of rot in the Boiling Isles, for at its literal heart is an infection that threatens to devour the land and all who dwell there. The Lord. The ruler of the Boiling Isles, Belos, became emperor some 50 years ago through a combination of demagoguery and magical prowess. He convinced the witches and demons that he and he alone had the ability to communicate with the spirit of the dead Titan and interpret its decrees. I was initially baffled that anyone would be naive enough to swallow such obvious chicanery. By the time I left the Boiling Isles, I had a far better understanding of how manipulative Belos could be. The central tenet of Belos' reign is a crusade against what he confusingly terms wild magic. This is not the chaotic energy that abounds in Runetown and Gravity Falls, but the name used on the Isles for all but the most restrictive spellcasting. Its opposite, the form of casting supposedly condoned by the Titan, is the Coven system, in which every adult witch chooses a school of magic and has its sigil branded on their forearm. I took this at first to be the same sort of specialization that wizards practice outside the Isles, and was appalled to discover the truth. A member of the Divination Coven, for instance, does not simply learn spells of that school more easily or gain unique powers of foresight. The sigil ensures that they can only learn and cast spells of that school. The idea of anyone willingly hobbling themselves in such a way seemed like eschewing literacy because one could calculate sums, but the witches insisted that unfettered access to magic was a dangerous blasphemy against their Titan god, despite the fact that the Titan itself was a being of powerful magic. Much became clear when I learned of the existence of the Emperor's Coven, an elite cadre limited to Belos and his chosen few, who were able to cast spells from all schools. I assumed at that point that I had Belos' measure. He had harnessed the power of religious fervor to convince the witches that it was their duty and their privilege to have his boot upon their throats, and through the Coven system he had ensured that no one would have a broad enough range of magic to stand against him except his hand-picked loyalists, and wild witches, whose existence his people were happy to help him stamp out. He was despicable, I thought, but straightforward enough. How very wrong I was. The land. I cannot overstate how unwelcoming the Boiling Isles are to outsiders, and I mean the Isles themselves as well as their residents. Weather phenomena range from boiling rain to shale hail to pain bows, all of which are every bit as enjoyable as they sound. And I was given to understand that had my patron's gifts not removed the necessity for eating as well as breathing, it would have been nigh impossible to find food that I could digest. And then, of course, there were the witches and demons themselves. I quickly learned to use Mask of Many Faces to blend in with the populace. When I looked human, I met with ridicule and contempt at best, and with attempts to dissect or eat me at worst. When I gave myself pointed ears, people still threatened to eat me, but not as often. This antipathy toward outsiders is also reflected by the borders of the domain, as my patron is no doubt aware given his choice of mist talisman. The borders are permanently closed, and only by anointing oneself with a small quantity of Titan's blood can one hope to enter or exit the Isles. Just as well, why anyone would wish to travel here is beyond me. Doubtless my patron conducted a variety of experiments on other applications of Titan's blood before supplying me with any. Nonetheless, I have attached some research on his properties from the Isle's various academic libraries. Of course, I was mindful of my patron's recent remarks that he is most interested in objects of Agrabanian provenance. It is far easier to search for what my patron is looking for when I have a hint as to what it might be. I made certain to visit the bustling marketplace in the town of Bonesborough, both the legitimate commerce that takes place during the day and the highly illegal night market that crops up after hours. Given the isolation of the Boiling Isles, I did not expect to find anything remotely Agrabanian, or from anywhere else that I recognized. However, I did encounter a stall run by an outlaw wild witch named Ida that seemed to deal in detritus scraped from outside the Isles, from a single glass slipper to a lance large enough to be mounted on a dragon. I looked over her wares with particular interest, but the only Agrabanian items she had were a set of small animal figurines that could be stacked into a pyramid. Although exquisitely made, their frivolity could be interpreted as appearing as common, cheap junk to the mundane eye, so I have sent them to my patron. As I left the marketplace, I heard the voice of a young man behind me. "Are you Dee the human?" I should have been more creative with Mask of Many Faces. I simply looked like myself with pointed ears, so anyone who had seen me without it would recognize me. I turned and saw a youth in a white cloak and gold mask. I had heard of him. The Golden Guard, Belos' right hand. "Why do you want to know?" "Your presence is requested by Emperor Belos." His words struck me like a punch to the gut. It was just like Titan. The despot's favored minion had seen through my illusion, and I was caught. I was going to succumb to a sleep spell, and awaken manacled in a torture chamber, and if I lied about my purpose, he would start carving glyphs into my skin, and then he would activate them, and... I didn't even realize that I had begun to cast Eldritch Blast until the Golden Guard stepped back, hands held up in a placating gesture. "Whoa! Calm down. You're not under arrest. If I were arresting you, I'd be done already. He just wants to talk to you. We don't get many visitors from the human realm." I hesitated. He seemed utterly sincere. If Belos had ill intentions, I was certain that the Golden Guard did not know of them. "You confiscate nothing from me. Nothing. And I never have to turn my back on you for an instant." "Of course. Like I said, you're a guest, not a prisoner." He paused, then added, "And if you were a prisoner, none of that would help anyway." Well, how very encouraging. I suspected that if I refused to accompany him willingly, I would find that I was, in fact, under arrest, and I made sure to cast a death ward on myself as I followed him to his flying ship. He peppered me with questions about what he called the human realm as we traveled to the castle. His enthusiasm was oddly endearing, and I found myself revising my estimate of his age downward by several years. When we arrived, he escorted me to the throne room, where Emperor Belos waited beneath the Titan's rotting, still-beating heart. His theatrical attire, white robes and a golden antlered mask, did little to set my mind at ease. Belos dismissed the Golden Guard and the rest of his retinue, leaving us alone. Then he asked the last question I would have expected.
"Tell me, how are things in Salem?"
That was disconcerting. A handful of the lords I have met on my journeys have had me at a disadvantage when it came to knowledge about my patron, but barring figures such as Jareth and Marley, who dealt exclusively in such mind games, this was the first who had knowledge of me. What do you know of Salem?
As it is today? Not as much as I would like. But I hear it in your voice. The accent has little changed in 300 years.
A significant time in Salem's history, that. I folded my arms. All right. You have my attention, so you can stop with the tantalizing little hints. What were you doing there 300 years ago? He sighed.
Not enough, I'm afraid. I did what I could, but I fear I was too late to save poor Emily and Thackeray Binks.
And with that, he removed his mask. The face beneath was older than that of the statue in our town square, as one might expect. It was bifurcated by a strange green scar, and the nose had been broken, but I would have known him anywhere. How much time had I spent studying this man and his brother, hoping to someday follow in their footsteps? You're Philip Whittabane, I whispered. You're the man who hanged the Sanderson sisters. Dread possibilities. Upon learning Emperor Bellows' true identity, I was nothing short of starstruck. I must have misread the situation in the Boiling Isles, and badly. I would sooner have believed Rudolph Van Richten a villain than the greatest witch hunter in Salem's history. Is Caleb here too? I asked. Truth be told, I had always preferred Caleb's statue to Philip's. His was a kind face, serious but gentle, whereas Philip's carved expression had stopped just short of a sneer. A shadow passed over Philip's face.
Caleb is gone. He was beguiled by a hag, and she tricked him into giving her his soul. I tried to save him, but there was nothing left to save.
Oh, Philip, I'm so sorry. I put a hand on his arm and had to fight the impulse to pull it back. The flesh under his sleeve felt soft and spongy, like a piece of rotting fruit. Silly. This was Philip Whittabane. Some hag had probably set a curse on him as a farewell gift before he dispatched her. It wasn't a cause for disgust, it was a battle scar. I almost lost my brother too, I said, to the Sanderson sisters. Their curse came to pass. They came back. Well, to be honest, he brought them back, but please don't hold it against him. He was young and stupid and trying to impress a girl. And the whole story came spilling out of me. I know, Jan said, it was foolish, and I can make no excuses for it save this. Philip and Caleb Whittabane had been my heroes ever since that fateful night. I do not know if you have ever admired anyone like that. It is quite impossible for me to imagine you as a child, but meeting one's idol in the flesh has quite the deleterious effect on one's judgment. When I finished, he put a hand on my shoulder, and I was secretly relieved that his gloves were too thick for me to feel anything through them.
You did well, Danny. Witches are deceitful and manipulative creatures, and many innocent souls have fallen to their tricks. We cut the branches. You were the one who pulled up the roots. I'm glad you were there to finish what we started.
I blushed. God, I actually blushed. Well, thank you, but I feel like all I really did that night was get rescued. I just sat there uselessly while my brother almost died to save me. I hated it. That's when I decided I wanted to fight witches and monsters like you. I wanted to be able to protect the people I care about, not to be the one who needed protecting.
Yes, that's it exactly. People like you and me, we understand that we need to do whatever it takes to purge the world of evil. Here in the Boiling Isles, I found the source of that evil, and you can help me destroy it.
I straightened, every nerve coming alive with eager anticipation. Yes, Philip wasn't the darkness at the heart of the Boiling Isles, but he had found whatever it was. Of course I'll help you. What is it? What's the source? He blinked.
The Boiling Isles.
He enunciated it slowly, as if talking to a small and rather stupid child.
This place is the home of witches and demons. This is the roots, not just of the Sanderson sisters, but all of them. I'm going to tear out those roots. I've been preparing and planning, and I've done what was necessary.
I rolled the idea over. Philip had forgotten more about witches than I had ever known, but no, his theory made no sense at all. He seemed to be conflating the Boiling Isles with the Feywild or some hellish plane rather than recognizing it as one more domain among many. Still, I didn't want to hurt his feelings, so I tried to be diplomatic. don't see how it's possible that the Boiling Isles are the source of all dark magic. I mean, a symptom, certainly, but the disease itself? Philip gave me a censorious frown that made me feel like I was that small, stupid child, and I had been caught whispering in class.
I understand this can be hard to accept,
he said in a tone devoid of understanding.
You aren't the first to have trouble seeing this place for what it truly is, but I've studied this land for centuries. Believe me, this is the only way to keep the human realms free from corruption. I'd hoped you'd be wise enough to see that.
I bristled. When was the last time he had set foot into the world beyond the Boiling Isles? And yet he saw fit to lecture me on it. This place is unpleasant, I'll give you that, but I've been studying what you call the human realms for over 3 years now, and some of them are so much worse, and in ways that have no relationship to the Isles. There's evil here, certainly. I can barely go a day without someone threatening to eat me, but they're just people, compared to... Something under his robe writhed, and that green scar seemed to squirm against his flesh.
Enough, you sentimental little fool. You sound just like... Your brother was an imbecile who endangered all of Salem. You would endanger all of the human realms with your weakness and gullibility. These are not people. They are lying, evil temptresses. Now, do you want to keep your family safe, or do you want to sit by uselessly again and watch them die?
Don't you dare talk to me about my family. Destroying the Boiling Isles won't do anything to protect them. Do you see a single hag here? Do you see anything that Winifred Sanderson would even have a name for? Because I don't. I see things calling themselves witches and demons, yes, but I see families, I see children, Philip, and you're talking about killing them. The Sanderson sisters killed children. We're human, we're better than this. The green flesh wriggled again, twisting his entire face, and he let out a small grunt of pain as he replaced his mask.
If you were clearing an infestation of rats, would you spare the pups?
This was all wrong. This could not possibly be one of the two great heroes of Salem. One of the two. And then I knew. I knew. I looked straight into the eyes of his mask. Caleb was a sentimental little fool too, wasn't he? Philip, Bellows, made a snarling sound that was not entirely human. Grabbing his staff, he used some sort of magical force to hurl me across the room. I hit the wall hard, stars flashing across my vision. I had to get out of here. Now. I tried to turn invisible. He counterspelled me with a gesture that bordered on languid. Gash's form met with the same nonchalant dismissal. He could have attacked me in between. He didn't. He was playing with me. Misty Step. That had worked against Judge Doom's counterspells. The door was too far for me to reach it in a single casting, but I could get close enough to make a run for it. I surrounded myself with silvery mist, and in an eye blink I was within a few paces of the door. Only for Bellows to appear right in front of me and toss me back to where I'd started.
I see you found yourself a new witch costume,
he said.
Not a terribly convincing one.
With a snarl of frustration, I assumed my form of dread and drew as much necrotic energy into myself as I could hold. Do you prefer this one? I spat and hurled a pair of eldritch blasts at him. I hurt him. Not as much as I would have liked, but I hurt him. He recoiled, and something green and foul and gangrenous oozed out from under his mask.
You almost had me fooled. I see now. Should have smelled the rot in you when you walked through my door. You are evil. You are corrupt. You have sold your soul to a witch king who saw the filth within you and made you his own. Like calling to like. But I know what to do to witches.
4 bolts of energy crackled from his staff and struck me, throwing me back to slam against the floor. Something sharp stabbed my chest, and I knew I had broken a rib, but I was laughing. I couldn't stop laughing. I knew an eldritch blast when I saw one. No wonder I admired you. Blood frothed on my lips as I spoke. My rib had punctured a lung. If I had needed to breathe, I would have been drowning in my own fluids. But still, I laughed. I saw the filth within you. Like calling to like. Who did you sell your soul to, witch? Bellows let out a shout of rage that deepened into a bestial roar, and he erupted. Putrid green mold burst from beneath his robes, and in the final instant before I could no longer see him, his face seemed to push out past his mask, revealing a rotted, horned skull. But then his arm had shot out and slammed me back against a wall, engulfing my face. I believe I died then. When I struck the wall, my skull made a sound like an axe splitting a log, and instead of putrefying vegetation, I smelled apples. There was no pain. Curious, there had been so much only a moment ago. But then warmth flowed through me as death ward set in, and everything hurt again. And all I could see and smell and taste was rotting fungus. It flowed around my face and burrowed into my nose and throat, thick and slimy and horribly warm. I gagged, clawing at his arm. My instinct screamed that I was suffocating, that I needed to breathe, even though I did not. That was it. That was my only chance to survive. I let my struggles grow weaker, slower. I made one last, feeble tug at his arm, then went limp. He held me there for at least 5 more minutes. He wanted me dead, not unconscious, and he had clearly done this before. Finally, he pulled his arm out of my body. It took all my effort not to gag again or to flinch when he let me drop to the floor, but I remained still. If I made the slightest movement or sound, I would never leave the room alive. Once I was down, he took a moment to lean against the wall, wheezing. Then his arm shot out again, grabbing a small object that I could not clearly see. He cracked it in half over his face, and as the fungus receded back into his body, he became visibly calmer. He returned to stand over me, and although his demeanor was cool, his tone was bitter.
You stupid little girl. We could have killed them all together.
Then he called to the door.
Hunter, clear this garbage out of here.
Parting thoughts. I am certain that I made an involuntary sound of pain when the Golden Guard was carrying me out. Every time we moved, my rib found a new and exciting place to stab me. I am just as certain that he heard me. He paused, cocking his head, and from that point on, he carried me more carefully. I think he was meant to throw my body into the chasm of jagged rock surrounding the castle, but instead, he left me in a secluded spot outside. Nonetheless, I waited until he was well out of sight before drinking a healing potion and stealing away with all possible haste. I must ask, Ansid. You told me years ago that my family and I are under your protection so long as I remain in your service, for which, make no mistake, I'm extremely grateful. What happens if that service ends in my death? I agreed to work for you so that I could gain the knowledge and power necessary to protect my family. I cannot protect them as a broken corpse. I need assurances that you will provide for them in the event of my death. Otherwise, all of this is for nothing. As difficult as my meeting with Bellows was, it could have been far worse. Had he played me with a touch more subtlety, he would have had me eating from his hand. Thankfully, it seems that after 50 years of absolute power, his abilities to persuade rather than to browbeat have atrophied. I know that much of what Bellows said was either empty flattery or an attempt to demoralize me, and yet his words left me with one other question for you. Surely you did not hire me because you saw filth within me or any such nonsense, but why did you choose me, Azul Rex? I use your title rather than your alias quite deliberately here, for when I thought you were simply Yensid, a reclusive wizard with a personal project, I did not think to question it, and truthfully, the idea of learning magic while simultaneously proving my mettle was so intoxicating that it left little room for such doubts. But now, you're the King of Darkon. You have tens of thousands of subjects, many of them educated at the University of Villalook itself. Why then did you bring on a woman from a backwater village outside your realm who had yet to master anything beyond cantrips and for whom you harbored no particular fondness? Beyond that, I have no patience for hypocrisy, and Belos has helpfully illuminated some corners of my own life where I have allowed it to flourish. I will not be like him, practicing magic while holding myself above others who do. If I am a witch, then I am a witch. So mote it be. If there are evil witch hunters, it stands to reason that that I can embrace this title without casting aside my principles. Anointing myself with Titan's blood and holding a carving of a bear as a mist talisman, I wondered whether this had always been my fate, whether the Sanderson sisters had marked me for it as a child. But no. Fate is a coward's answer. There are those who say fate is something beyond our command, that destiny is not our own. But I know better. Our fate lives within us. You only have to be brave enough to see it. Regards, D.
Emperor Belos is not the first hypocrite to use the tools of his supposed enemies against them, though admittedly, he is quite clever in his designs, ensuring that only those loyal to him can access the true strength of the arcane, while others are limited. I have no doubts he has plans for those brands beyond mere suppression. Despite his narrow-minded worldview, Belos' theory is not as ludicrous as my little scholar believes it to be. Is the source of corruption in these demi-planes of existence the Boiling Isles? No. Is there a location, an individual tied to the first act of corruption that holds it all together? Quite possibly. It is a theory that is supported by centuries of data, yet if such a linchpin exists and is destroyed, the consequences are currently unknown. There are many possible outcomes, none of them insignificant, and is not something to be tested lightly. Excuse me, I digress. Although I could tell you tales of Enrichten that would make you reconsider your antonym, you are not the first to experience disappointment in the face of reality, and I shall not fault you for it. The idiom, "never meet your heroes," comes to mind, and exists for a good reason. The historical accounts of so-called legendary heroes are often as finely polished as their exaggerated statues. I myself was lucky in that regard. As a young lad, I admired a talented archmage, who I eventually became the apprentice of. He had his faults, but Quantarius never lied to me. It is a pity your Philip's heroism was nothing more than a mask he wore to manipulate those around him and fuel his need to justify his hatred. The truth of what Belos did to his brother Caleb is, well, it may be better if you remain ignorant. It is not something a kind soul such as Caleb deserves. To be held in such a state for eternity, so Philip may make amends. Admirable dedication, yet Is it for Caleb or to appease his own? Excuse me, Danielle. I believe I have said enough on this matter. It is a pity that Eda's booth only contained these small, stackable figurines. They are indeed useless junk, though oddly soothing to manipulate. We shall talk soon enough, though I find it difficult to ease your mind when you imply that you find any potential similarities between us so appalling. That I am full of evil and filth where you are not. The power you utilize is mine, fueled by me, so that begs the question, just how alike are we, my dear?
This has been The Wonderful World of Darklords. We have no affiliation with Disney or Wizards of the Coast. All music recordings used in this episode are in the public domain and were obtained through museopen.org. Titles and links are in the show notes. Dialogue for Yensid was written by Aslan Rex himself, who you can follow on Tumblr at DarklordAslan. The Wonderful World of Darklords logo was designed by Haylight Jones. You can find links to their work in the show notes. If you'd like to support the show, look for us on patreon.com or find our tip jar on Red Circle. Thanks for listening.